Hello, everybody. It's the top of the hour. We're all kind of rolling in. I realize it is Veterans Day, and many of our federal colleagues have the day as a holiday. I'm going to wait a few minutes just to give a little bit of leeway and start a couple minutes after the top of the hour. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start. We're rolling in, and there's always, as we know, a fair number of announcements, but we do have a fairly robust agenda as usual. So welcome. We're going to focus on the social connection consensus voting and then a lot of review. As you'll hear throughout the presentation, we couldn't cancel this meeting because there's so much content to review, and our next scheduled meeting is actually on Thanksgiving. So we're holding it, and we'll, of course, post the recording online on the Confluence so for people to review. So there's a lot of master lists to get updated over the course of the next week or so, but we're really glad you're with us. Again, I didn't introduce myself this time, but I'm Sarah DeSilvi, the Director of Informatics for the Gravity Project. Next slide, please. As always, everyone's muted upon entry because of usually the large number of attendees. I do, as many of you know, try to work the chat. So if you can send any comment to everyone, I will try to respond to it as we go. We really do encourage active participation in the discussion. There is one caveat that if the conversation gets too off topic, we will ask to just hold that conversation and convene it at a later date of the meeting or on or offline by email, just so we can keep everybody focused on the items at hand. Again, please send chats to everybody. If they're sent personally to me, I will read them out loud because I cannot discern from everyone to personal chats. All right, next slide, please. This is just a standard antitrust practice slide. Next slide, please. We wanted to make sure, we actually just had a longtime member realize that they are not officially a member of the project, even though they've been participating actively for a very long time. So if you've not already done so, please officially join the project and at least look up whether you've already joined at the first link and the second link. I think we're upwards of like 1,200 actual members right now. I think we just got that title, that number for a presentation Evelyn gave the other day, which is pretty amazing. Is that
1,000? It's over 1,300.
wow.
So
Wow. And that's active members. So what an amazing collective we are. So again, do please make sure that you have officially joined the project. You can check whether you're already signed up. And then always the Confluence is a massive amount of data and information regarding both of the work streams, the technical and terminology work stream, overview of our committees and updates and announcements. Next slide, please. Just a nod and appreciation to all project funders, grantors, and in-kind supporters. Next slide, please. Um, Regarding sponsorship, so we are looking to complete a sponsorship for 2022. It's an opportunity to be recognized as a contributor to the work. If you want to learn more about sponsoring, there's two ways to do that. You can send an email to gravityproject@emiadvisors.net, or you can visit the Confluence and review the sponsorship elements and then send a message through there. Next slide, please. All right, so announcements, we're gonna go over some project schedule and overview. Then we're going to the social connection goals and interventions vote, and then review of veteran, intimate partner violence, and stress. Knowing that we have an extended time to our next session, and we hope to come back um, to together in December and close many of these domains down. We do realize that there's a lot of socializing to do, so if there's concerns, please let us know. But we'll be communicating via email throughout this next time and updating masters as we work with our subject matter experts. And then we're going to go into technology update with Dan and Bob, and then we'll close with community homework and next steps. Next slide, please. Okay, announcements. Next slide. Again, just always a plug for our sister meeting, the HL7 SDHCC Fire IG public meeting on Wednesdays from 3 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. And then there's a couple updates. We've talked about the Amazon Web Services grant that's due on Monday. And then I think we've also talked about the Health and Human Services Postpartum Equity and Care Challenge, and the submissions are due on December 17th. There's always more details regarding anything that we've briefly announced here on the announcement page on Gravity's Confluence. Evelyn, anything else to say regarding the announcements, or are we good there, you think?
We're good, thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. Here we are at our roadmap. Ever so shortly, you will be seeing 2022 come to bear. We're finalizing the domains that we're working on in 2022. We thank you for your patience on that. We are completing our work on veteran status, psychological stress, and intimate partner violence. That work has great synthesis with the other domains that we covered. So stress shares many elements with social connection, and intimate partner violence is sharing many elements with elder abuse, as you'll soon see. And then Dan and Bob will report out on the technical status very shortly in their presentation. Next slide, please. Any questions on the agenda or the schedule? Okay, onward. Next slide. Here we go. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. I wanted to take a moment. I even asked permission if I could to take a moment to recognize the team for the initial completion of the VSAC value sets for the domains we've completed so far. So this achievement cannot be underestimated. It is, they're going to be tested and published tomorrow. The terminology leads of Linda Hyde and Katja Schell really worked overtime while maintaining all the requirements of domain build as we close out our fall domains. As I mentioned, they'll be tested and published tomorrow ahead of our November 15th deadline. We worked very closely with our friends at the ONC to make sure that we could do this. We definitely want to give additional thanks to our colleagues at the American Medical Association, Jim Shalaby and Monique Van Berkom, for all of their insight. Was a Herculean lift on top of everything else, and it really is just such an amazing achievement. We do know that many of our colleagues, whether they be in the quality measure world or in the implementation world, have been waiting for these value sets. So it's a very, very crucial step towards taking the code we're building and putting it into practice and implementation. So thank you, Katja and Linda and Jim and Monique. Woohoo! Okay. Next slide, please. All right, just one more, shout out again from an announcement perspective. The letters of comment are due to NCHS, the CDC the ICD-10 Coordination and Maintenance Committee on Monday, November 15th. There is a link on the Confluence that contains a letter that you can use for reference. It includes both a general statement of support and specific statements that support our deep dive requests that we've reviewed in our public meeting so far, like our comments regarding material hardship, our comment regarding personal history of military service and deployment, and our comment regarding a submitted code of health insurance and security. So all of that's available on the Confluence if you or your organization wants to submit a letter before the November 15th deadline. And on the Confluence as well is the is the email. Next slide, please. This is just the details that you'll see in the letter. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the email and everything you need to submit is both here on the slides and on the Confluence link with ICD-10 CM. So yeah, so it's very exciting. So if we can, we've already seen a few of our friends send letters of reference in CCS, and we're just very grateful. And a special nod to our friends at the VA who are sending a letter of reference in support of us asking to go back to the submission we originally submitted, which had military deployment and military service as separate codes. So again, thanks for our collaboration with the VA, especially on Veterans Day. Next slide, please. We did want to just give an update. We met with colleagues from NIOSH. I think it was on Friday. All time is blurred right now because we're so busy. I think it was on November 5th. I even wrote in my slide, just to ensure that we were merging with ODH value sets in our work with Gravity Project. And the great thing is, because we already had aligned with Bureau of Labor Statistics definitions, we are completely on target. As many of you know, we always try to ground all of our definitions with federal approaches to ensure that we're aligned with federal monitoring. So the one opportunity that we really have is expanding some of the employment goal terms that are already, and many of those are already in SNOMED, because the work classification terms that exist in SNOMED, some of them are on our value set, some of them are on our data set, and some of them are not. And then, as NIOSH mentioned, there's some missing terms in SNOMED that we can help work to get into the system. So again, grateful for our federal collaborators, and really grateful that we're already on target and in line and can actually help forward and some of the work that's been done already to include the value set work into SNOMED. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. All right, here we are. Next slide. So as you know, and I'm going to say this again and again, so we were going to plan on having the veteran status vote, but it is Veterans Day, so we're not doing that. We are going to have the social connection vote, as you'll see very shortly. That vote is extended again to allow our federal partners to vote without using their holiday to do so. You can see that we are trying to aim for a December 9th vote with the domains that we have on target. That would mean, because we don't have the November 25th meeting, we will socialize the idea if we need to have an ad hoc meeting. We're just hoping to tie things up if we can. Please let us know if you have any concerns regarding this. Again, all the information for review can be done asynchronously, and many of the masters are already pretty close to being tidy and complete. So hopefully there won't be too many gaps before we head to vote on December 9th. Next slide, please. This is the hazard of having our meetings on Thursdays. We did just want to remind, this is a slide that we presented before. I think it's a really good grounder, that we actually just talked with the HL7 patient care work group on protective factors yesterday. Thank you for our friends in the patient care work group. I'm really trying to figure out about, in the name of addressing social determinants of health, how we ensure that we're considering protective factors as well as social risks. And as you all know, we've taken the tack so far in Gravity to build really frugally, and many of our goal terms could be used as protective factor terms in different patient stories in different settings. So we had a really wonderful conversation yesterday, and look forward to ongoing collaboration with that work group. And again, grateful for our friends at HL7. Next slide, please. This was any questions on that slide? Sorry to go back. We've talked about, we presented this slide last week and went pretty in depth. I just wanted to make sure that everyone grounded on it again. Okay, fantastic. Next slide. All right, we're going to go into the vote. Again, this is our little kind of roadmap of where we are. We're going back and forth between vote and review today. So the vote is specifically on, Tom Page, is the meeting November 14th? Oh, so Tom, I'm sorry, I missed this question. The the ICD-10 CM meeting was on
Never mind.
September.
You clarified it. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, I missed it. All right. Okay, so next slide. Next slide. All right. Again, a huge thank you to our amazing social connections SMEs. Because we broke out screening and diagnosis in the spring and goals and interventions in the fall. They've been with us for quite some time. We've become very, very close. We've really enjoyed our time with them. We meet them Thursday evenings. We convene across multiple time zones. Just can't be more grateful for the collective wisdom of Eddie Garcia, Dr. Julianne Holt-Lunstead, Dr. Matt Pentel, and Dr. Carla Persinotto. Just wonderful folk. In fact, it's kind of hard for us to close it out because we've had so much fun, but thanks to them. Next slide, please. We wanted to give an update. So as you all know, our original objective was to complete social isolation alone. That was what was on, no pun intended. That was on our roadmap, but at the request of the SMEs at no additional cost to the project, but just additional like intensity. We built out the 3 different core elements that relate to social isolation, this being social isolation, loneliness, and lack of social support, all under social connection. We had socialized the idea of addressing poor relationship quality and relationship strain, but in further reflection, it's so different, it would really require a whole different set of data set and different diagnoses and different goals and interventions, and these weren't formally approved by the project and would have cost additional labor, and we would have had to have brand new SMEs because the SMEs that we gathered, although they recognize the core element of relationship quality and relationship strain, this is not their area of expertise. Social isolation, loneliness, and lack of social support are. So we're pulling relationship quality and relationship strain into the parking lot for now. Next slide, please. You can see this. And this is really to try to make sure that we convene the right subject matter experts and the right time frame in order to complete that work well. However, there is a full, complete set of information across screening and diagnosis in the spring, and goals and interventions that we just completed now for social isolation, our original mission, and loneliness and lack of social support. Any questions on that element? It was really the needing to convene a whole new group of SMEs that just made us realize that it wasn't really feasible at this stage. We'd have to regroup. Okay, next slide. No changes on much of the content that's here. There's only a few other additions. And again, I do want to credit the team for adapting. We did only intend to do social isolation, and we all pitched in to complete these other 3 elements that everyone thought was crucial. So no changes on the goals. They remain unchanged from the last time we saw them. Next slide, please. No changes on any of the programs and their definitions. These have remained constant over the course of many weeks. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. The one update is actually not in the realm of our fall objectives. Again, our fall objectives were to cover goals and interventions primarily, but we did discover a few relevant screening tools in our own end-to-end review of the final set. And these are the only new additions to the master. So there are some additional screeners that we found that were relevant. Our SMEs agreed. So these are the only things that are new to the master. They were on the master that got sent out earlier this week. So the vote includes elements really from the spring's work that have just been updated. One thing of note, of course, because the ecosystem is alive, this kind of adjudication and adding to the gravity sets and the eventual sets in VSAC is of course going to be part of our work as we become the curators of the value sets over time. Any questions about this part? Okay, next slide, please. The vote. We've been doing a lot of voting. I am still going to run through the voting process. So the yes vote is that it doesn't necessarily mean the deliverable is ideal, but it's better to move forward than to block the deliverable. Yes with comment, form and formal objection both require emails to the Gravity team to further develop. So yes with comment is if when a consensus process is you just say yes, but, and you deliver the but in an email. We resolve all comments and address them back to the submitter. And if there's enough comments with yes with comments, we do bring back the elements publicly to make sure that we have formal public revision. Formal objection, this again has to be submitted formally. If you do not submit a formal statement regarding your objection, which has to indicate a path to address the objection, it just flips to an abstention. The yes with comment and the formal comment emails are due by the 18th, and you email them to gravityproject@emiadvisors.net as usual. And then abstain is just a member declining to vote. As always, if you request or desire the link to be emailed to you, Sarah B. did do an absentee email that was part of her general email out to the community, but we always can help you with that after the fact. Next slide, please. So the goal is you can review the social connection master list. Again, you'll only see updates and screening questions and answers. There's no new elements in any other section of the set. You're going to complete the Google poll by, usually it's on Friday, but because of Veterans Day, we're extending it to Monday. So 5 p.m. Monday, Eastern Standard Time, November 15th, you complete your Google poll. And then we just want to remind everybody
Disregard, you did it before I could hit the send button.
Oh, did we fix Brian, did we address your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
I love it. We're addressing questions before. I feel like we're like clairvoyant today. Tom's question, Brian's question. So you must press submit for answers to be recorded. And again, if you're voting yes with comment or formal objection, email your comments to gravityproject@emiadvisors.net. Amazing work. It is one of the things we do in the state. So I was giving a presentation on social isolation and social connection with one of the social connection subject matter experts, Carla Personoto. And one of the attendees was a researcher, and she was asking whether she'll be able to draw down all the screening tools for research. And I was like, absolutely, yes, you can. So I think the use cases of the work that Gravity does are far beyond the use cases we hypothesize are those three that ground our work. I just want to give a nod again to the effort of collating and curating all of the screening questions and answers in one place, and how really there's many different ways they can be utilized across the ecosystem. So just know there were a bunch of PhD students who were really excited that work was done. So it was exciting to hear. Thanks all for your work on social connection, and we hope to get your votes, and then we'll come back and let you all know what the results were when we convene again. Next slide, please. Any questions? Okay. Next slide. Now we are going to go into a ton of review, just so much. So we have updates for veterans, we have updates for intimate partner violence, we have updates for psychological stress. Again, this is the reason why we really had to have this meeting, is there's a lot of data to see. I do want to state that because, again, of the terminology team pushing forward very intently on the building of the value sets, the master list won't necessarily reflect everything you see here, which is kind of hot off the presses. Excuse me. Until early next week, but just know that in our emails, we'll communicate when those master list gets updated. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right, reminding everybody what the purpose of end-to-end review is. So the master list will be updated and available on the Confluence. Our job at this time is to take a step back and consider the set as a whole and ask questions. Are there missing concepts? Are there incorrect concepts that need to be changed? Are there concepts that are unnecessary and can be removed? All comments and edits are best offered in written form with rationale and evidence for suggested alternate approaches, because then whatever suggested alternate approaches you have get reviewed by subject matter experts. And please send them and all comments to gravityproject@emiadvisors.net. Okay, so end-to-end review applies to all three of the domains we're covering in our work over the next few minutes. Next slide, please. Okay, veteran status. Next slide. Just a reminder, I already said this, but we're delaying the veteran vote for two reasons. One's because it's Veterans Day and we needed to honor the moment of remembrance. Two, because there's a promising work being done with VA social work and VA clinicians, and we can use this moment to let it mature. One of the things that happens with the Gravity Project is sometimes you just knock on a bunch of doors and then you've hit the mother load of, and so we are really, really working very closely with Dr. Megan Kennedy and the VA social work team and just really enjoying that time. So there's a lot of promising work coming out of there. You'll see that over the next few slides. Next slide, please. We are having the VA team review the appropriateness of these two domains because there are some questions from our VA subject matter experts. They might be like one and the same. We're still hemming and hawing over that. Next slide, please. And then really right now, because much of the programs themselves haven't changed much, we wanted to share the approach that we're working on with the VA, right? As we build out community terminology, right, for use in community settings, so not just in the VA, we are choosing to focus on building any primary resource, whether it be a hotline or a directory. And I say we, I mean us in collaboration with the VA. And any professions such as veteran service officer or VA social work that would allow a community setting, clinical or otherwise, to help connect a veteran to resources. So primacy is on any specific hotline, directory, person, role that a community member can pick up a phone or go to online, and then the wealth of information from the VA is open to that person you're trying to help, right? So whenever there's something like that, it gets built. We saw something very similar with this, with social connection. It's just very different. The amount of the breadth of resources with the VA is quite broad. We also are establishing naming conventions for all VA official programs so they can be easily found. And then as an initial test of concept, we, instead of building out every single program for veterans from the VA that might have specific sub-qualifications, because there are many, it's thought right now we're going to build parent concepts that allow grouping of the many programs available to enable mapping from the VA to community care, right? So what we're doing right now with our colleagues who are VA clinicians and VA social work is aligning those kind of parent concepts with existing groupers and grouping concepts that exist within the VA and the VA social work approach itself. So we're not building different. And then there'll be a lot of explanations regarding the many varied programs that are included underneath the different parent concepts. But it seems at this stage of Gravity's work that seems prudent. And then understanding if you're communicating back and forth with the VA, we can do mapping and to ensure that things don't get lost. Otherwise, the program list would be massive. And so this is what the VA thinks would be a helpful approach first. Any thoughts here? All right. Okay, it doesn't seem like that's, it seems the community thinks it's as wise as the VA and we do. All right. So again, every primary resource that can offer direct assistance, and then parent concepts that allow grouping of program types within the VA program family of programs. And you'll see that all on the master list. There's some elements there now, and then we meet again with the team from the VA on Friday next week to really consider what terms might need to be rolled up because they're too granular. Next slide, please. Are these programs typically already included in most 2-1 listings? Some are and some are not. We have, some are not necessarily directly included, and so the grouper terms that we have will align with groupings within 2-1 as well. Did that answer your question? Okay, it sounds like it did. This is just a common intervention and goals themes. Great, love it. I see the thumb. Just reminding everybody that we really are developing repertoires of programs that can be applied to different different concerns. So we pull them into different domains as necessary. Next slide, please. All right. So review veterans complete, right? So not the veterans is not complete, but the review is. And the biggest highlight is based on the connection we have with direct care clinicians and VA social work. There's a lot of promising organization that's happening in our interventions lists. So we're looking forward to bringing that back to the community ever so shortly. Next on to intimate partner violence. Again, big thanks to our subject matter experts, Chris Grosso from Fenway Health and Lisa James from Futures Without Violence. Next slide, please. So the naming conventions will clarify when it's administered by the VA or all that are veteran eligible, and that's why the convention exists. So when it's administered by the VA, it'll have one kind of naming resource, and when it's just VA veteran eligible, it will have a different naming convention. Jane, did that help? Okay. We want to just give a call out right now to our intimate partner violence goals. Again, anything in italics, we're still kind of working on terms. Many of these goals come over from elder abuse because, as you remember, on our timeline originally, like interpersonal violence was on the timeline. I think it was even violence, just alone, right? So elder abuse and intimate partner violence share many concepts and approaches. So a lot of the approaches you see here on intimate partner violence are carried over from elder abuse. We do want to state we've gotten some really thoughtful comments on the elder abuse submission that if they get adjusted, will also be brought over to IPV. So if we have approaches such as the term mitigated, and if we need to clarify definitions for any of those common goals, it'll be across elder abuse and IPV. I want to give a shout out. This is kind of actually directly related to why I included the slide regarding protective factors. So our colleagues within the intimate partner violence subject matter expert group are really the first to kind of highlight some of the more classic terms that we use as protective factors in the literature. So there's the Strengthening Families Initiative, of course, that's a federally administered initiative, but all the work really regarding social determinants of health usually requires addressing and fostering protective factors as you're addressing risk. This carries through work, of course, with harm reduction and any kind of family care and family programming. So deeply working in the realm of families, as you do when you're addressing intimate partner violence. Our intimate partner violence SMEs have raised the goal of positive cultural identity, autonomy, and spirituality. And these three, again, are very classic protective factors in the literature. I think we're going to try to work on a protective factor tab on the Confluence so that we can share all the lit and resources we have to help individuals find to familiarize themselves with the concepts that many of us deep in the work are aware of, but we want to make sure that everyone is aware of them. So, the newest really goals from intimate partner violence are the positive cultural identity, autonomy, and spirituality. Again, all of these have very clear basis of literature and research regarding fostering them from a strengthening protective factors framework. Any questions? All right, next slide, please. There aren't too many updates on this slide. Again, these are programs that we brought over from elder abuse. There's only one thing because of having a better definition. The Victim Assistance Program is a new term that was a revised term from Victim Advocate Program. There's federal funds and federal designations that go down through these programs. So there's the Victim Assistance Program and its definition. And then next slide, please. And then you can see on this next slide, these are new programs. So we have Intimate Partner Violence Service Provider. Again, this is a federal definition because there's federal qualifications. Parent support group programs, again, because of the family nature of the work in addressing IPV. National Narration Law Center. And then again, kind of thinking again from the framework of our work with the VA, there are many cultural and gender affirming resource centers. We've been calling them like nexuses of knowledge, but there's places you send individuals so they can be known within their cultural identity or their gender identity and get specific programs that meet them where they are. So we're collating a term for those kinds of resource centers and then really trying to assess how many of them need to be built out specifically. And this is work that will happen over time, but this is the general header right now that we're working. You know, if you kind of want, if you're referring to one, and it might have a local name and it will never be built into HIT, but you want to make sure that this is how you're focusing your support. Like for instance, we have a specific intimate partner violence program in my city for individuals who are LGBTQ, right? So if I wanted to specifically refer to that program, I could use this program type. Strong Heart Hotline is on the program list because it's a national hotline. That same way that we have with the VA build, anything that is nationally available and specific. So that's there. And then they elevated the term of health insurance navigator, which we had from our financial security build. Again, you can find all these on the master. Any questions here? Everyone's really quiet today. Next slide, please. All right, and then closing out with psychological stress, and then I get to pass the mic to my tech team, my tech friends. Okay, next slide. It looks like Dr. Prather's alone, but he's not. So Dr. Prather is the representative who meets us from the UCSF Stress Measurement Network. So everything that we do with Dr. Prather gets socialized back into the UCSF Stress Measurement Network. But he is also so fun. He's another evening on EST meeting that we all have after our regular work days, and he's been a joy. He's an expert in psychological stress, and again, a representative from UCSF Stress Measurement Network. Next slide, please. So these are some goals that we're working on. Again, some of the wording is incorrect because we have to finesse it a little bit to fit into our the way we frame goals, but you are sitting in stress. You have resolution of stress. We can remember this from this type of build from our elder abuse build. Stress mitigated, again, that's very akin to our intimate partner violence and elder abuse build. In this instance, we have removal of stressor as well. This one has to be finessed a little bit, but the ideal intervention is to actually remove the stress. So we think about, the best thing is to make the system kinder to the person. So removal of stressor is one goal, and then adequate social support comes over from our social connection build. Any questions here? All right, and again,
this is great. I just want to say, this is Janice. This is really smart, and there's so much issues with stress right now. I don't think we can emphasize this enough.
Yay, I'm so glad. And I think the one thing we do want to stress is, again, from a justice perspective, we don't just want to change the way we are reacting to the environment. The ideal thing is to change the environment. So
Right.
yeah, so we just wanted to call that out, that ideally you're not just changing the way you're coping, you're actually resolving the stressor in the best state. I'm glad you think it's good, Janice. I always appreciate you. Any other comments here? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, these are all common programs. Remember the theme. So we have intimate partner violence akin with elder abuse. We have stress, which is akin with social connection. So there's many common programs that are pulling over from stress, from social connection. We do want to specify, we didn't state it here, but we presented it last time. So we also have drawn down almost all of the professions, refer to professions from the both elder and child depression intervention value sets in VSAC. So those are there as well. So this is the common programs of social connection, and then you have the professional refer to terms that are standardized across the ecosystem. And then next slide, please. And we also have new programs, right? So specifically, again, almost all of these are about stress reduction, about changing the way we're responding to our stressors, right? So we have taken great care to ensure that anything that's standardized across the healthcare ecosystem and the community ecosystem is built in. So we mindfulness-based stress program. There's lots of clinic-based and community-based programs for mindfulness-based stress programs, whether they be at your local Y or your local area agency on aging or your local hospital. So those are there. There are many applications. You can remember we offered a lot of application options within our social connection work. So there's stress reduction applications that are available on your phone. We took care to elevate the role of nature immersion and ecotherapy here. The literature regarding just being in the wild and being in nature for stress reduction is very, very clear. The definition is still in flux a little bit, but really holding space for the fact that we know, whether it be ecotherapy is quite broad and it covers everything from just, whether it be nature bathing, which is just sitting in the woods, to more formal nature therapy and nature exposure. We have biofeedback therapy, and then we have breathing techniques for relaxation. So this is everything from 4-7-8 breathing to other different types of breathing. Again, there's lots of literature regarding how breathing techniques for relaxation can assist in downregulating the stress response and improving feelings of stress. Can you say why Gravity defines these as programs as opposed to services? Other clinical value sets aren't as always consistent about the distinction. I think it's because of our work within SNOMED, honestly, Matt. And this is a Wayback Machine, but we do recognize that social care services from a 211 community-based world map to our programs that we have in SNOMED. Yes, I also am an NP who prescribes nature walks. I even prescribed someone to go sit next to a cow a little while ago because they needed cow energy. So Matt, did that answer your question?
Yes. Open referral defines them both. That defines the main thing, service, and says organizations can optionally organize services as programs. So,
Okay.
but I think just conceptually, there seems to be a lot of confusion about the fine distinction.
Maybe we can work with our friend Greg on that one.
Yeah.
We'll try to bring clarity to that. We really are in a glossary stage right now where agreeing on what we mean when we say blank is really important. So Matt, I'm just going to elevate that that's something that we might need to be a little bit more clear of, because obviously my answer was not very clear. I didn't give you a definition or reason why. So we'll look at that and then come back, and maybe it's something we can work on in the TAC actually. Who knows?
I would just wanted to say looking at one of I don't remember which value set I was looking at, but it was I think it was a SNOMED value set, and most of the programs were defined as things like SNAP or WIC or like the government programs, whereas we in Gravity seem to be more kind of broadly speaking, kind of calling everything kind of a program. Anyways, I'm just trying to find some consistency throughout the industry on this issue.
Yeah, that seems great, and we'll work. I think we don't always use the term program, but certainly in our headings we do, right? So it really might be better to say new programs and services, right? But we just didn't have that as the heading for our, I think that, so Matt, we'll take it back. We'll make sure that we're trued up. And then I do think it's a good thing to talk about in the TAC.
And SNAP and WIC are included in the food. And I added in the,
Yeah, Shinrin.
yeah,
Yes.
that would be a
Yeah.
good example to add.
Yes, it would be. Yeah, that was part of, yeah, that was part of what we were holding space for with the definition. Okay, so Matt has an action item, and then Janice has a nice includes but not limited to. Okay, any other questions here? All right, next slide. Yes, Rita's correct. I know, this is why I'm going to elevate it. I think it needs to be socialized a little bit, but thought about so that when, so especially when someone asks, why do you do this? I can at least give a reason why, right? As opposed to saying, I think it's this way. So we can all work on that together. Sound good? Okay. I think that's the end of the terminology section. Next slide. It is. I really want to thank everybody for coming. You can see that there was a lot to review. And we're very, very glad you all came along, and I'm happy to pass the mic to my amazing colleagues, Dan and Bob.
Hey, thanks so much. This is Dan Vreeman. I'm the technology director for the Gravity Project here. If we were all in the room together, I'd say we should all stand up and stretch. But since we're not, you can maybe do that on your own. But I'm going to share a few updates related to our work on the technology work stream, which is really focused on developing the exchange specifications that allow computer systems to be able to share and understand the information that we develop all these terms for. And so on the next slide, I wanted to just recap from our last discussion. I tried to walk through a couple of definitions for text-specific lingo that you might hear us use frequently. And I recognize that we are an open community and we're always welcoming new folks into the conversation, some of whom may be very familiar with some of these words and terms, others it's completely novel. And so I'm trying to be mindful of that, and also would appreciate any suggestions people have for things that you're like, you said this, but I have no idea what that means. We could come back and do further explanation. But last time we talked about syntax standards, semantic standards, this specification HL7 FHIR and the community around it, the work that we're doing to develop a FHIR implementation guide, which is a specific specification, a standard in its own right, that constrains the base FHIR standard for a particular purpose. In our case, the exchange of SDOH data. We also talked about reference implementations as a software component that is designed to work in the standards development process to test out and demonstrate the features of something like an implementation guide. So all of these things we had some definitions and examples of for, and we'll work through them to become part of our emerging ongoing Gravity Project glossary. So on the next slide, I wanted to introduce you to just two more entries today because I recognized that we were going to talk about them and invite you to participate. So I wanted to just make sure you had some sense of this. So a FHIR Connect-A-Thon, you've probably heard Connect-A-Thons, and there are definitely many standards groups that talk about or use the word Connect-A-Thon. In our case, we're primarily referring to FHIR Connect-A-Thons, which are events that are focused on actually developing and testing the specifications through structured hands-on work. And this whole thing, this peer testing process, is really what helps us ensure that the specifications themselves are clear enough that different people interpret them consistently, because that's, of course, the purpose, right? We want the software that people build to be consistent in how it interacts with and expects data. And so this process of engaging in a sort of formal hands-on testing event helps us discover when stuff doesn't work. And that way we can learn and improve the standard itself. In one of these events, participants are expected to either write there on the spot if it's sort of a simple enough use case, or to have written or be using some software that demonstrates connectivity. And so there are many events. They tend to happen, a couple times a year through HL7. Sometimes they're organized by federal agencies like CMS or other groups. And I've given a link to an upcoming one here. I wanted to note that the FHIR community is really committed to welcoming new participants. And so even if you've never been to a Connect-A-Thon, never heard of it, but want to participate, it's a safe place to come. Newbies are welcome. And the intent is that it's a place where vendors who might be selling competing products work together in an open collaborative way, and it's a fail forward kind of mentality. So that's sort of a little bit about what a Connect-A-Thon is. On the next slide, I want to just review the ideas around and the process around balloting, specifically within the HL7 Standards Development Organization. So on the terminology side, we just talked through and discussed the voting approach here. And on the technical specifications, we're working through HL7's process for developing these specifications and ultimately publishing them as standards. And in HL7, balloting is the formal process used to get feedback and to resolve that feedback on specs before they are published. And it's this balloting process is designed to be conformant with both HL7 processes as well as ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, which is the organization that accredits HL7 as an SDO, to ensure things are open and fair. The idea is that we want to have the community who's going to be adopting and using these standards agree to the expectations that that specification sets. I want to make a special note that, of course, anyone can provide feedback on an HL7 specification or a FHIR implementation guide, for example, at any time, and they don't have to be an HL7 member. But the balloting process is sort of a special effort to ensure both systematic, open, and fair comments and processes to resolve them. And if you want to dig in more, you can follow the links that I've shown on the slides here and that Sarah has posted here in the chat. Thank you very much. So that's kind of a quick overview of when we say balloting and we're talking about a FHIR implementation guide, this is sort of the process that we're referring to here. So on the next slide, I'll give you sort of the high-level overview of what a ballot cycle is. You've heard about our work on the FHIR implementation guide, the January ballot, and then this period that led up to a publication of the first version, et cetera. As a quick breakdown of what happens in a ballot cycle, there's kind of 5 main steps that I'll just cover here real briefly. So the first part is you can sign up to join the pool, get in the club to be able to comment on a particular version of the specification. So what goes to ballot is sort of a frozen in time instance of the specification. And then everyone who's sort of in that pool, the reviewers can submit comments. And those comments can be to note issues, to say, this is amazing, it's the best thing I've ever read, or you can suggest changes, etc. And then you cast an overall vote, either affirmative or negative, or you can abstain. And that's sort of about whether you think this thing is ready to publish as is. The work groups, the HL7 groups, then review all those comments and address them through a process that's referred to as reconciliation. And this can take a pretty variable amount of time depending on how many comments are received and how substantial they are and the amount of effort it takes to sort of work through and resolve them. But at the end of that, the balloters who may have voted negatively can decide whether they perceive that reconciliation outcome to have addressed their concerns, and if so, they can choose to withdraw that negative vote. And then at the end of sort of the reconciliation process, there's sort of a final determination about whether a spec can be published as a standard depending on the balance of affirmative. And for different levels or sort of maturity of standards, the sort of pass-fail criteria can vary. We have developed a specification that went to ballot first time as a standard for trial use in STU2 level. And what we're going to be talking about going forward in the January cycle would also be an STU2 sort of level. And in that case, the sort of criteria for passing is that the number of affirmatives out of the combined total of affirmatives plus negatives has to be greater than 60%. So that's kind of like the real high level view of what a ballot cycle is like. And then on the next slide, I want to draw your attention to two specific opportunities for you to contribute, if you're interested in that, to our specification development. The first is to be able to participate in this coming HL7 ballot cycle. We are scheduled and I believe on track to have the second version, the STU2 version of the implementation guide, go forward in this ballot cycle. And right now there's sort of an open sign-up period to join the pool, and that'll close on December 9th. And so if you follow this link, you can figure out how to sign up for the pool if you're an HL7 member, or if not, there is a cost to participate in the ballot cycle. And just as a reminder, though, that even if you don't want to do that, you can provide feedback, but the balloting cycle is the sort of formal way for getting feedback registered and addressed. And the second opportunity to participate and build your experience, and as well as to help improve the specification, is to participate in the upcoming HL7 Fire Connect-A-Thon, which will be a virtual event the 10th through the 12th of January. And the link there is where you can sign up to join. And in that process, there'll be sort of a track for the Gravity Fire Implementation Guide, and an opportunity for, depending on what context you might be coming from, what kind of software you might be working on, you to play different roles in that, but also to interact with sandbox or sort of test environments and the reference implementation software, which is our exemplar software. Okay, on the next slide, I'll sort of zoom in on the technology workstream portion of our roadmap. And you can see some of the things that I have been referring to. So on the sort of top line, we have the row that talks about our work on continuing to develop the implementation guide. And that is coming up towards the version 2 going to ballot at the end of the year. We have continual work on the reference implementation software. Basically, as we add new features to the implementation guide specs, we want to make sure that the software demonstrates and exercises that capability. So that's kind of ongoing. And because we haven't quite stretched out our timeline to 2022, we don't have the dot for that Connect-A-Thon there yet, but it will be coming. All right, on the next slide, I am just sort of recapping what it is that is in this implementation guide that we've been referring to, the first version of which was published in August. And it addresses the activities of screening and assessment, of documenting health concerns and problems, establishing and recording goals, interventions, including referrals to organizations to address social needs, consent, representing sort of consent to share information, as well as some techniques for aggregating information. On the next slide is a summary of the work that we've been doing in the meantime since August to update and extend the implementation guide going towards version 2 or STU2. There are two main sort of components of that work. The first is to fill in some of the key workflow aspects that were described or encompassed by the things outlined in the first version, but weren't really done, weren't really completed. And those components include the ability for a patient or caregiver to use an app to participate in the information exchange, whether that's the referral process or contributing information about the outcomes of services delivered via forms or questionnaires. And the second is the ability for community organizations to use an app to interact with and update information about referrals, as opposed to having a case management or other system that had API-enabled features sort of built into it. So sort of an external app versus native capabilities with an API. And then the third piece of this is techniques for those apps to be able to sync up with multiple referral sources, where they might be receiving requests or referrals from several different independent source systems or provider systems or referral platforms, for example. The second main component of the work has been to evolve, enrich, and enhance our approach to linking or binding to standard terminologies. One aspect of that has been an ongoing conversation with the teams who are working on the FHIR US core profiles. And those profiles are designed to support what is represented in the US CDI, the US Core Data for Interoperability dataset, which you've heard discussed and talked about here on the Gravity calls. And the version 2 update of that includes social determinants of health information across a few different domains. What we wanted to do was ensure that those FHIR US core profiles and our Gravity IG had a similar, i.e. Compatible, identical, as close as possible, synchronized approach to identifying what terminology sets should be used for which particular data elements, say within the condition resource to represent diagnoses or health concerns, within interventions, representing those, etc. And so that is in part one of the things that has been linked up with the amazing work that we just celebrated of developing the value sets for in VSAC to make available in a computable way the collection of terms from these different terminologies. So really excited about that. And you'll be seeing that as part of the update in STU2, as well as part of what will be forthcoming in the US core profiles as well. The second aspect of our kind of enhancement regarding standard terminologies is enabling the use of social service taxonomies in the exchange. And this is still kind of a work in progress, but the idea would be that we would want to have the specification be able to support the coding of, say, service requests using a term from, say, the 211LA taxonomy, in addition to the terms from, say, SNOMED or another intervention term, and sort of side by side. And part of that has to do with the way our specification can identify coding systems, i.e. a taxonomy. And so we're excited about the possibility to be able to allow both of those terminology approaches to work together. On the next slide, I will share just sort of a little bit of a update sort of on our testing plan. So we've been working on sort of two things. One is the lead up to the ballot of STU2, and that's how we described doing some one-on-one system exchange with the reference implementation. And we plan on and are working towards doing some of that testing this month. And really the whole point of early implementer testing is to provide feedback on the features, the new features in the implementation guide, and to ensure that it meets the validating requirements. So if any of you are listening and have been working on software and would like the opportunity to test, feel free to reach out and we can try to connect with the right opportunity for doing that. All right. And just to sort of wrap up our conversation here on what's happening with the tech stuff, I wanted to come back to our example from last time as just sort of an illustration of how do these things, work in and with the terminology work that you've also heard about today. So on the next slide, I'll come back to this simplified sort of persona example. And we're using just a little, snippet of a story from a patient called Esperanza Cordova. And over on the right, you see the overall conceptual framework that kind of organizes our thinking about the processes that we're tackling here in the Gravity Project. And this sort of cycle or circle with screening and observation, diagnosis, goal setting, interventions, and so forth. And last time, Karen, yes, you can send a note to the main Gravity email account, and they will connect you with us, and that would be fantastic. So here in this story, what we covered last time was, in preparation for a visit, our patient, our person, Ms. Cordova, is invited to complete a whole person health questionnaire. She accepts that invitation and completes that with the help of her clinic staff at the check-in. And on the next slide, we show how the work to establish and identify screening instruments and that codification in LOINC provides a basis for a computable, shareable definition of those instruments, those questionnaires. So here is an example of this part of the reference implementation software that can render forms or any form that uses that standard definition. This is the example, of course, of the prepare instrument. All of the questions have LOINC codes, all of the answers have response values that are coded as well. And so here, that form can render this, or it can render the hunger vital sign, or it could render any screening instrument that's represented in that consistent manner. And that, of course, is quite useful. And then on the next slide, you see how those structured coded screening results can be sent over and stored in a receiving health information system. And this is an example screenshot from the reference implementation software of the provider's EHR, which sort of shows, that when our patient, Ms. Cordova, completed that questionnaire, it's linked up here. And if you would click on that, you could see those structured answers. So we went over that last time. On the next slide, I'll just sort of extend that and say, okay, maybe the case was that Ms. Cordova indicated that she or her family were unable to get food when they needed it in the last year. So that would be, a response value potentially on that prepare questionnaire. And then as part of the patient-provider conversation, they identify food insecurity as an assessed need, and together might then agree on a goal of a referral of some kind, perhaps to a community meal service. So here on the next few slides, I'll just sort of show how that representation, the work of the terminologies and the structures to represent that, can be reflected in the software. So on the next side here, we've got the coded diagnosis here. You can see an entry for that active problem, and it has a reference to the fact that this was based on that screening questionnaire and conversation with the patient. And if behind the scenes, there's some additional detail to that representation. On the next slide, you'll see kind of the pop-up that displays how below that, or underneath that inside the system, is the coding, for example, with the ICD-10 codes and the SNOMED code for that diagnosis as well. And then, we discussed how, that might be, after sort of establishing that, the next step might be to agree on a potential course of action or set a goal. And on the next slide, you can see that the system can record those goals using the terminology that's been built out in these different domains, and capture that, as well as to link it or associate it with the underlying sort of condition or problem of interest. So here, we might be describing a goal around establishing food security, and you can see the different possibilities for sort of next steps and things that could be recorded here. So again, these are all just to give you an illustration of how the underlying structures that are defined in the specification can be made use of in software. And of course, this is example software, but it is meant to sort of illustrate how these things sort of come to life in the context of clinical or social care or other health information systems. So on the next slide, I'll just sort of repeat our open invitation for feedback on the technical specs, whichever pieces of the workflows are of interest to you or of focus to you. We definitely would like to hear from you, and also would want to reiterate the encouragement to join the weekly Wednesday meetings where the technical specs are being reviewed and improved all the time. And there's also a link there to be able to submit feedback. With that, I think I've come to the last of what I wanted to share with you today, and can ask if there are any questions.
Dan, that was lovely. This is Sarah. It's always, I feel like I learn something every time you present, which is great. This is a gift for this terminology person. Any other questions from the community? Dan, thank you so much for making the tech come alive for all of us on these calls. It's really, really helpful.
Awesome.
It's true. Yeah, you're also very calming. So it's like, I'm just listening to a lovely story about technology. Okay. Fantastic, Dan. Thank you so much. So I think next slide, I think we're ready to wrap it up, correct? All right.
I believe so.
Yeah, Dan, do all the things Dan said. Like join, make a comment, join the Connect-A-Thon. We really do need people to test out this stuff, and you can comment. You can send the email to gravityproject@emiadvisors.net for pretty much everything we've said so far. Next slide, please. Most importantly, we want you to, well, not most importantly, everything's important. Submit your social connection vote by Monday end. Review all of the content that we have for veteran status and partner violence and psychological stress. Catch up on any materials as needed. And then you have your homework from the tech world as well. And we close this meeting and wish all of our veterans a happy Veterans Day. And again, because of the holiday in 2 weeks, we will not formally convene until December. So we wish you a lovely holiday, and please email us if you have any questions. There will be a lot of virtual catch-up on the Confluence over the course of the next few weeks. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.